What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we've got a top 10 Elvis Presley movie songs brought to us by friend, longtime supporter, and patron of the channel, Evan David. Thank you, Evan David. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons that make this thing go. If you'd like to support us in any way, as little as $1 a month, please check out the Patreon link below, the Patreon link on the end screen. We could not do it without them. And if you've never been with us before, I'm going to tell you right up front, the music will not be in the video. We're watching a lot of videos, 7 of these 10 songs. We're going to watch performances or movie performances. So click that Vimeo link below if you want to follow along with us with the full experience. All right, Evan David always has thorough, fantastic write-ups, and this one's no exception. So these are all Evan David's words. He says, rock and roll legend has it that even as Elvis Presley began taking the world of popular music by storm in the mid-1950s, acting as the budding king of rock and roll himself put it, had nevertheless always remained, quote, my greatest ambition all my life, I wanted to be an actor, end quote. After all, Elvis had been a keen movie buff since his childhood, and moreover had since developed a particular fondness for such male screen icons as Rudolph Valentino, Tony Curtis, and especially James Dean, who you could see that, whose masterpiece role in Rebel Without a Cause he had seen no fewer than 44 times, leaving him able to get down on his knees to recite several pages worth of the movie's dialogue to said film's director, Nicholas Ray, when they first met. All of these actors he would use as role models to some extent when crafting what would become his on-screen persona, following his initial screen test in 1956. And what might be seen as an early sign of artistic disappointment to come, however, Elvis's movie debut that same year would not, as he had first hoped, see him play a supporting dramatic role alongside Katharine Hepburn and Burt Lancaster in an Oscar-nominated Western romance movie called The Rainmaker, but rather saw him in another considerably less prestigious Western movie, one which is at first to be called The Reno Brothers, but was swiftly renamed Love Me Tender in response to the then staggering advance sales of over 1 million copies of the single of the same name, which Elvis would duly sing in the movie itself. And Evan David says, of which more later. Little hint, right? While the movie was indeed a commercial success, however, the on-screen death of Elvis's character upset many of his fans, not least his own beloved mother, Gladys Presley, leading to the late addition of an extra scene of a ghostly Elvis singing the title track once again over the end credits, and Elvis himself insisting that his future characters should never die on screen again. Moreover, Elvis later claimed to be less than impressed with his movie debut for other reasons, remarking that it, quote, almost finished me off in the business. They rushed me in the thing to get my name, on the marquee, and the picture wasn't all that good. If you play yourself, you're much better off, like Jimmy Dean, Marlon Brando. With Love Me Tender, I couldn't play myself because this character I was portraying was so far from me, it wasn't even funny, end quote. Evan David says, so began a musical and cinematic odyssey, which would see Elvis star in no less than 30 more cinematically released feature films during his lifetime, with his first few post-debut movies such as Loving You and Jailhouse Rock in 1957, and especially King Creole in 1958, seeing Elvis play characters far more akin to the sort of youthful rebel roles that the likes of the aforementioned Dean and Brando had pioneered, while also often mirroring aspects of his own rise to fame, or at the very least taking full advantage of Presley's musical talents and creating their hit soundtracks. Despite all this unabashed exploitation of Presley's status as a musical teen idol, however, not to mention the often condescending at best attitude of many contemporary movie critics towards not just Elvis movies, but towards Elvis himself and all that he represented, many of Elvis's own early producers, directors, and co-stars, such as Hal Wallace, Don Siegel, and Walter Matthau, nevertheless came to admire Elvis's seemingly ever-growing potential as an actor in his own right. Such positive early reviews of Elvis's latent cinematic talents were perhaps best summed up, however, by the director of Loving You, one Hal Cantor, who insisted that, quote, Elvis had a natural ability to perform in front of a camera. He could have been an excellent movie star and not just a freak attraction. It never happened because Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, wouldn't allow it to. Indeed, it is certainly the case that under the increasingly risk-averse, not to mention penny-pinching influence of his manager, and especially following Elvis's apparent regeneration as a decidedly more clean-cut type of all-around entertainer following his return from the clutches of the U.S. Army in 1960, a period of Elvis's life which was itself the focus of one of Elvis's most popular movie, G.I. Blues, of which more later, another little hint there. His cinematic efforts would in turn increasingly become even more formulaic in nature, with the author of The Rough Guide to Elvis, Paul Simpson, aptly summing up the results of this approach as follows, quote, "It's oversimplifying things to say that Presley pictures were all about girls, songs, and gorgeous locations. The template was actually far more detailed than that. He had to have a manly occupation. He was a race car driver 3 times, or be a professional singer. His inevitable buddy would either be as dodgy as Elvis was basically good, or straight if Presley was a lovable wide boy. Where possible, cute children should be on display. But to balance things, Elvis should get into a fight in which he was invariably the innocent party. Thanks probably to Parker, carnivals, shows, and fairgrounds were never far away. Elvis should go to jail, be put on trial, or at least be harassed by a tax inspector before finally managing to get his car, or perhaps his speedboat, ready to win the race. It'd be nice if we could also find time to sing on the back of a truck. The last word belongs to Elvis himself, quote, "They're all the same damn movie with that Southerner singing to something different." End of Elvis's quote. In truth, the number of his movies which don't fit that stereotype is in single figures. On the other hand, Elvis himself also once remarked how, quote, "People say to me all the time, why won't you do an artistic picture? Why don't you do this picture and that picture?" And that's fine. I would like to do something someday where I feel like I've done a really good job as an actor in a certain type of role. But I feel that it comes with time and a little living and a few years behind you. I think that it will come eventually. And that's my goal. If I can entertain people with the things I'm doing, I'd be a fool to tamper with it. It's ridiculous to take it on your own and say, well, I'm going to change. I'm going to try to appeal to a different type audience. But because you might not. If you goof a few times, you don't even get any more chances in this business. That's the sad part about it. Moreover, in his Elvis biographer, Peter Gerlach once argued, even at their most formulaic, Elvis movies and their soundtracks nevertheless, quote, successfully substituted attitude for belief in making what amounted to the first music videos in which plot and character were beside the point, and the underlying marketing strategy was for the music to sell the movies, and the movies the music, which they very effectively did. Perhaps the best way to look at Elvis in these films is a kind of consummate professional who can do whatever is asked of him and do it gracefully. And their great popularity, along with the enthusiasm with which successive generations have seized on well-crafted numbers like Viva Las Vegas, only underlines the solid musical foundation on which that professionalism was built. For better or for worse, however, Elvis's own time in Hollywood would indeed run out, Evan David says, before he could make the true acting breakthrough that he so longed for throughout his career, with most of Elvis's remaining energies following his career redefining comeback special a year prior to the release of his last dramatic theatrical movie, Change of Habit, in 1969, being devoted increasingly to grueling live performances in Las Vegas and elsewhere. And we had documented in 2 highly acclaimed cinematically released concert films, That's the Way It Is in 1970 and Elvis on Tour in 1972. Evan Davis says both of which, however, lie beyond the scope of this particular list. Nevertheless, and for all that many Elvis fans and critics before and since, and indeed Elvis himself on occasion, as we have seen, have bemoaned the lack of artistic ambition, not only underlying many of Elvis's movies, but their soundtracks to boot, with the latter's increasing sense of staleness, perhaps partly due to Colonel Parker's notorious reluctance to accept material from writers who were not already part of his and Elvis's own song publishing empire, as much as the sheer sense of diminishing returns from having to make up to 3 soundtrack albums a year. The fact remains that after listening, Evan David says, to all 31 of Elvis's theatrical movie soundtracks while preparing this list, I was nevertheless still able to find at least 10 musical gems that I hope both Sean, as well as the wider RTTC community, and even Elvis fans at large will enjoy, while at the same time stressing, as ever, pay attention to this, that this top 10 list is no way, shape, or form meant to be a definitive one, but rather to stimulate a hopefully lively debate. And I look forward to seeing your own Elvis movie songs, top 10 lists, in the comments below, while also hoping that even the more rabid Elvis fans out there remember the King's own words and don't be cruel while making said comments. And he says, which wasn't one of his movie songs, of course. Before going on to the reaction proper, however, I'd just like to dedicate this top 10 list of songs from Elvis movies to the biggest Elvis fan I know, namely my own ma'am, whose birthday is in April, and I'm filming this in April of 2024, and to whom I'd like to say, as the King himself put it, a hearty thank you very much for putting up with me all these years, and hopefully many more. And he says, Penblade Happus, ma'am, which is Welsh, of course. I am not Welsh, but it's happy birthday for Welsh. I did the best that I could on that. And now he says, right on to the proper list indeed, and Viva Las RTTC. Yes. So I'll remind you again, the music will not be in the video, but it will be at the Vimeo link below. If you haven't already, go check that out because we're going to watch, like I said, 7 videos on this. Well, let's kick it off with number 10. And you see it below. We got Love Me Tender, released as a title track to Elvis's debut movie in November 1956. After having first been released as a single 2 months earlier and reaching number 1 in the U.S. Billboard charts, as well as number 11 in the UK. This beautifully simple, elegant ballad, whose melody was originally based on the American Civil War anthem R.O. Lee, swiftly became indelibly associated with Elvis, who, as the song's lyricist Ken Darby put it at the time, had easily, quote, adjusted the music and the lyrics to his own particular presentation. Elvis has the most terrific ear of anyone I have ever met. He does not read music, but he does not need to. All I had to do was play the song for him once, and he made it his own. He has perfect judgment of what is right for him. He exercised that judgment when he chose Love Me Tender as his theme song. The emotional impact of this tune upon Elvis's growing fan base as a result can best be gauged by reacting to this live clip from the Ed Sullivan Show in September of 1956. I'll say a couple things about that. It's interesting. Elvis could not read music. You know who else could not read music? Paul McCartney and John Lennon. I thought that's really interesting. And, you know, Elvis takes a lot of heat for not writing the lyrics. I know back then they didn't do that. Please don't come at me with that. I understand music history very well. I've got 2,800 videos up here, many Elvis, Sinatra. I get that, but it takes a lot of heat for that. But I think what he did the best is what Ken Darby said, that he could sing anything. He can make any song his own, right? And you would believe that it was his song, that he'd been singing it all his life. Like it's a very difficult skill to have, and Elvis had it. I mean, I've read a ton of stuff on that, but I won't go into all of that. But I will say my own personal connection to Elvis. He died in August of 1977. I just turned 6 years old, but it's one of my earliest memories of my mom answering the phone. It was my grandma, and then my mom started crying, telling her that Elvis had died. Like it was that impactful, and I'll always remember that. All right, let's check out this video. All right, Love Me Tender. Interesting that he had the guitar to start with, but he decided not to. They decided not to present him playing the acoustic version of that. He could have played along with it. I know he was miming it and not actually singing it. But here's the thing. This man was 21 years old in this video. He looks so young. He's 21. The poise, the charisma, the way he owned the crowd, the way he was comfortable. I mean, he might have been nervous. You would never know it. Just the way he was comfortable. There's no one like him, right? Just to have that level of confidence. And I'm telling you again, he was 21 years old. His voice sounds good. His voice ends up sounding better when he comes back from the military because he actually had somebody help him with his voice there, teach him more. He hadn't really had anybody teach him much on just raw, natural ability, but he's got a ton of raw, natural ability. Really good choice for number 10. Now up to number 9, Charro. I know most of the songs on this list. This is one of them I don't. Released as a title track to Elvis's 29th movie of the same name in March 1969. After first being released as a non-charting single the month before. Non-charting, Elvis not charting, unthinkable. But you'll see as these songs unfold in the 60s. I mean, this is 69s, right? But his chart success is going to go like this because just different things came in. The British invasion obviously came in 64 and just different things. And Elvis got pushed to the back burner for a little while. The spaghetti Western style tune has long been one of my personal favorites, Evan David says, amongst Elvis's movie songs, due to its gloriously melodramatic sense of power and style, with the movie itself moreover being somewhat unique in that it is the first and only movie in which his character does not sing on screen, with said title song thus being the only time you'll ever hear Elvis singing throughout the entire film. So I'm going to react to a fan-made video that Evan David says gives you a good taste of what both the movie is like as well as the title song itself. Charro. I'm always impressed by these fan videos, right? This took a long time to put together. A good song, spaghetti Western type song. Sergio Leone in here just inspiring this, but a different kind of song. Obviously, Elvis still looked really good there in 1969. It's amazing how quickly his health deteriorated when you see him even in the Vegas film from 72. But yeah, still looks really good, man. Which I know he looked good in his comeback special. And yeah, I liked it, man. I liked it. Like I'd never heard that song. Something different, good variety. Now at number 8, we got A Little Less Conversation. Released as part of the soundtrack to Elvis's 28th movie, Live a Little, Love a Little, in October of 1968. After first being released as a single the month before and reaching number 69 in the Billboard Hot 100, according to this lively tunes composer, the great Mac Davis, who said, I had a song that I actually written for Aretha Franklin, A Little Less Conversation, but it fit right into the situation in the movie. And all of Elvis's movies in those days, the situation led to the song, and that's all the movies were written for, really, end quote. Evan David says, well, thus having gone somewhat under the pop culture radar at the time, however, the tune would later gain a new lease of life in 2002 when a remix version of it by one Junkie XL would feature in a memorable Nike ad campaign for that year's football soccer World Cup, and would even give Elvis his then record-breaking 18th UK number one when released as a single in June of that year. Prior to that, Elvis and the Beatles have been tied at 17 UK number ones each, with the score as of this writing, remember it's April 2024, being 21-18 in Elvis's favor. And I will digress there for a second from Evan David's writing and tell you that it's one of the interesting things in music history that the biggest artist in the UK in the 60s was Elvis. And the biggest artists in the US in the 60s were the Beatles. So in the opposite countries, I always just think that's kind of interesting and cool. Evan Davis says, nevertheless, and much like Elvis himself, the original version does have a certain life-affirming charisma and charm all of its own. And we're going to react to it being performed in that movie. All right, a little less conversation. Definitely just a music video, right? A little hard to match the voice with the music, just a little bit on there. Would have been something difficult to shoot. I mean, you talk about having a ton of extras inside of something. The dancing on there was hilarious because some of it was, and I'm not a dancer, so who am I to critique? But the song itself, a little risque for Elvis, right? A little less conversation, a little more action. But I thought, he owns the screen, man. He owns the screen. I don't think I mentioned it before. I've never seen an Elvis movie. I've never seen no particular reason. I mean, I just never really had a reason to. I might have to go watch something. I'm going to take your guys' suggestions at the end of what I should go watch if I was going to pick, let's say 3 Elvis movies. I mean, you can suggest 1 up to 3. Just, what would you pick? But all right, let's go on to number 7. We got Flaming Star. Releases the title track to Elvis' 6th movie in December of 1960 after first being released as a single 2 months earlier and reaching number 14 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. Elvis's tormented performance in this Western movie as the mixed-race son of a white Texan pioneer father and a Native American Kiowa mother tragically caught in a seemingly inevitable violent clash between his two cultures has long been regarded as one of the finest showcases for Presley's genuine talent as a dramatic actor, with no less authority than Quentin Tarantino himself once describing the film as, quote, a truly great 50s Western and maybe the most brutally violent American Western of its era. In any case, the song Flaming Star itself, with its singer depicted as being inescapably haunted by the death sign of his ancestors, remains a suitably melodramatic accompaniment to the movie. And while I for once wasn't able to find a clip on YouTube that I felt suitably captured this dramatic quality enough as to be worth reacting to, I, for one, Evan David says, remains confident that the Spotify version of the song will still possess more than enough doom-laden power of its own as to justify its place on this list. Different kind of song, too. Definitely cinematic. The backing vocalist a little stronger on this one, building this grand scape of, kind of torment that it seems like he's going through, but shows the versatility, as I've talked about before, of Elvis's voice. All right, number 6, in parentheses, Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear. Released as part of the soundtrack to Elvis's 2nd movie, Loving You, in July 1957, after first being released as a single the month before and reaching number 1 in the U.S. This decidedly short but very sweet tune remains one of the most irresistibly charming songs he ever performed, and may indeed have been one of the first Elvis songs that I myself, this is Evan David saying, may have ever heard as a child on a free cassette of animal-related songs that my parents got me from a UK petrol station, and this overriding sense of fun and charm is itself well captured in this clip of the song being performed in the movie itself. All right, Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear. I like that one a lot because it captures, like, he's peak Elvis right here. He's on stage, live performance. I realize he's lip syncing and miming it, whatever word but like, just the charisma, man. Just the charisma. It just jumps off the screen. It's that trait that you can't really describe. You just know it when you see it. So that was a fantastic performance. Great choice on a video there too. All right, we're to the top 5. You see it below. We got Can't Help Falling in Love, a fantastic song, man. Released as part of the soundtrack to Elvis's 8th movie, Blue Hawaii, in November 1961, and released as a single at the same time, reaching 2 in the US and 1 in the UK, kind of pattern on what I told you earlier. This gorgeously lush and much covered ballad has since become one of the most iconic tunes of Elvis's entire career, movie-related or otherwise, and yet, according to Paul Simpson, it was heading for the reject pile until Elvis heard it, rescued it and suggested it might be good for the movie. The song's substance was a welcome change for Elvis, and he was so taken with this song that he persevered for 29 takes when first recording it. Today, however, the sweet power of Elvis's original tends to be overshadowed by the slightly ironic, speeded-up renditions with which he closed almost all of his concerts from 1969 onwards, and is thus an attempt to remind a perhaps over-familiar audience of the aforesaid sweet power of this Elvis tune that I would like you to react to the original version. So we're doing the original version on here, which I think is the version I know, but maybe it isn't. But I mean, I think it is. All right, Can't Help Falling in Love. Just a tremendous performance. A great arrangement on that as well. It just sounds fantastic. All these years later, it still sounds absolutely fantastic. It just shows his diversity, right? This song it's great, man. It's one of my favorite Elvis songs. I mean, my favorite, Suspicious Minds, but that's another story for another day. Next up, little Viva Las Vegas. Released as a title song to his 16th movie in May of 1964. Released a month before as a single, 29 in the US, 17 in the UK. This fun-filled movie remains both the highest-grossing Elvis movie of all time, as well as perhaps being my own personal favorite, Evan David says, amongst the Elvis movies that I myself have seen thus far, not least because of the sizzling on-screen chemistry between Elvis and his equally vivacious co-star, Anne Margaret. Of equal significance, however, is the stronger-than-usual movie soundtrack, especially the title track. And while the latter was itself memorably covered by ZZ Top almost 3 decades later, I don't know that, and what remains perhaps my own personal favorite Elvis cover of all time, the Elvis original itself also remains hard to beat. I hope you will agree after reacting to this film, or this clip of it being performed in the film. Viva Las Vegas. The energy is insane, right? The energy just to film that is insane. Just a really catchy song. Different kind of song. You're already seeing all the diversity on here, but different kind of song. This compared to Charro, like two different worlds, right? Compared to Can't Help Falling in Love. But, you know, Elvis looks great, moving around, all that energy. A fitting pick for number 4. Our rarefied air top 3. Return to Sender, released as part of the soundtrack to Elvis's 11th movie. Girls, Girls, Girls in October of 1962. Released as a single during that month, reaching 2 in the US and, you guessed it, 1 in the UK. Its inclusion in the film was apparently one of the few undeniably positive moves that Colonel Parker made with regard to Elvis's movie-related music, as according once again to Paul Simpson, its co-writer Otis Blackwell hadn't submitted it for the movie, but mentioned it when he met the Colonel at publisher Hill and Range's New York offices. Parker pressed him to play it, then told Blackwell, "Don't worry, that'll go into the movie because it's a great song," end of quote. Nevertheless, it's Elvis's own unabashed enthusiasm for this wittily written tune. Indeed, shortly after recording it, he had apparently told his friends, "You've got to hear this. Listen to the words. I just love this song." That is more than anything to sell it to its listeners. All right, Return to Sender. The Jordanaires sound really good on the backing. The baritone sax on there by Boots Randolph, it's really good. I'm not sure I like it. It's the only part of the song. I think the song's fantastic. I think you feel Elvis's, fun side on this. Little fun song, and that, he messes up, so he sends her a letter, and she keeps sending it back, Return to Sender, for different reasons. Then he goes and hand delivers it, and she sends it back as well. But my man Elvis is keeping the faith that sooner or later she's going to break down. And in real life, she probably would have, but good choice for number 3. All right, Stone Cold classic here at number 2, Jailhouse Rock, released as a title track to Elvis' 3rd movie in October of 1957. First released as a single the month before, reaching number 1 in both the US and the UK. This criminally irresistible tune captures its audience from the very moment that what Paul Simpson calls, quote, the most distinctive intro in rock history slams into life with the power to set tapping feet independent of the owner's will. With this equally irresistible and iconic choreography. We're going to watch the clip from the movie, by the way, in turn giving a visual power that has made the whole sequence one of the most memorable of Elvis's musical as well as cinematic career. And as such, it would be more than a more worthy winner of this or any other list of Elvis movie songs, were it not for, wait till after this song. All right, Jailhouse Rock. What an unbelievable performance. Like, just unbelievable. Like he just jumps off the screen. The choreography is absolutely fantastic. He pulls it off seamlessly. Like, that is just a powerhouse performance. That if no one's ever heard of Elvis Presley, this might be the clip. This is the clip of everything we watched before that I would just show them and be like, this man. Now we get to number 1 on Evan David's top 10 Elvis movie songs. We got Wooden Heart, There's a reason why this is number one, but I'll get to it in a minute. Released as part of the soundtrack to Elvis's fifth movie, G.I. Blues, in November of 1960. First released as a single in the UK in March of 61, reaching number one in the UK singles chart. So I wonder if it wasn't released in America. This breezily charming tune was originally based on the traditional German folk song, I'm going to mess this up, Muss Den, which Marlene Dietrich had recorded 2 years earlier. And while it remains a uniquely appealing tune in its own right, we're going to watch the movie clip of it being performed in the movie. Evan David said, must freely admit that it owes its lofty place on this primarily to one very simple, very personal reason. It's his mam's all-time favorite Elvis song. And as his top 10 list is very much for her, then I simply had to give it the top spot, as I'm sure you all understand, if not necessarily agree. No better reason than that. All right, number one, Wooden Heart. Showing this man Elvis can do anything. He is doing a serenade to a puppet man, and he pulls it off. The grin. He knows he's in on the joke, right? He knows, but a good song, a different kind of song I've never heard, so it's not going to be up on the upper echelon for me, but I totally respect this Evan David's mom's favorite song, and happy birthday to her. Brought a great son into this life and done a great job there, but happy birthday to her. Shout out to her. Now, before we get to my favorite tracks, we'll get to the honorable mentions, the songs that did not make it for Evan David. And as he mentioned, he listened to all 31 of these soundtracks, and no one does a more thorough job than him on putting these lists together. Like, there's no way you could. So honorable mentions, got a lot of living to do. You're So Square, Baby, I Don't Care, Trouble, G.I. Blues, Pocket Full of Rainbow, Shopping Around, Wild in the Country, Blue Hawaii, Rockahula Baby, Follow That Dream, Girls, 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 Bossa Nova Baby, Kissin' Cousins, What I'd Say, Roustabout, Little Egypt, Girl Happy, Beach Shack, Spin Out, Double Trouble, and especially Let's Have a Party, King Creole, Fun in Acapulco, The Lady Loves Me with Ann Margaret, One Track Heart, Blue Suede Shoes, wow, man, which had been first recorded back in 1956, but was also included on the soundtrack to G.I. Blues in 1960 after being used in a sequence during said movie, and Guitar Man, which was included on the soundtrack album of what Elvis himself thought to be his worst movie ever, 1967's Clambake, despite not appearing in the movie itself, ironically helped to reignite Elvis's enthusiasm for his own non-soundtrack recording career in the process. If you want to know all about the story of how he got away from the movies, we got a review up of From Elvis in Memphis, one of my favorite albums of all time. Not Elvis, just anybody. So go look for that review after this. There's about 30 Elvis videos up on this channel. Now I got to get to my favorites. There's really no wrong answer here, right? But I'm going to go with, 5 faves, right? I don't have any honorable mentions. We'll go a little less conversation. Can't Help Falling in Love, Viva Las Vegas, Return to Sender, and Jailhouse Rock. The visual on this was quite helpful with Elvis. I've got to tell you right now, I've mentioned at the start, I got 2,800 videos up. I know a ton of music. I watch a ton of music. It's so striking when you watch these videos of there's never been anybody before or since who has a type of charisma to just jump off the screen like Elvis does. It's striking, man. It's crazy. It's crazy, man. So let me know your favorites down below. Give us your top 10 list. Remember the whole reason why Evan David did this. Be kind, but you can give us your own list, what you think of this list. All right, guys, if you haven't already, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. Super appreciate it. Until next time, I will see you.